How's it going, YouTube? If you're new to the channel, you may have seen some of my 06 Explorer videos. However, I did pick myself up a little work truck about a month ago. She needs quite a few repairs, but today we're mainly going to be focusing on the rear drum and shoe assembly. So let's jump into what gear you're going to need. All right, main things you're going to need. I'll get you part numbers in the video description. You'll need your replacement drum. Once you're in there, you may notice that your cylinder's in pretty rough shape on your drum assembly. So go ahead, do yourself the favor, about 20 bucks here. I already did my other one and it was in horrendous condition. I'll probably throw a picture in the video. But definitely want to get a replacement cylinder if it's in this bad a condition. As always, get your safety stuff. So get yourself a pair of gloves, safety glasses. This is a very messy repair depending on how greasy that bearing is in there. So gloves will definitely help. Impact drivers, not necessarily needed. You could just get away with regular old wrenches, but this will save you some time. The 90-degree one's really helpful for getting behind the actual cylinder. Get yourself jack stands if you don't have them for safety. I have a 3-ton jack for this model vehicle, which works well. Your pry bar is going to help you actually get the drum off, the old drum. You'll need, if you want to be in spec and be safe, you're going to need a torque wrench for your lug nuts and all that. Good breaker bar to start your lug nuts, getting those off. Little hammer, brush. That brush is going to go hand in hand with some brake clean. And when we disassemble this drum, you're going to see we're going to just put everything in there, clean it all off, get all the grease off. To go along with your impact drivers and your wrenches, good set of sockets. You'll primarily be using 19s and 15s for this repair. It's good to have both a long and a shorty set. Your C-clamp, this is going to come in handy to hold the brake shoe assembly in as you're trying to loosen certain things. So get yourself a good C-clamp. 2 is even better. Your actual replacement brake shoes. I can show you what my old ones looked like actually. You're going to want to get yourself some replacement fluid if you don't already have some. One of the procedures, especially when you remove a master cylinder and expose that, or not master cylinder, the rear cylinder, when you expose that brake line to the atmosphere, air is going to get in your lines. So you're going to have to bleed your brakes after this, which is always a good practice. And I'll make a video on that as well if anyone thinks that could help out. But yeah, anyway, that is about all you need for tools for today. I missed the bucket. You're going to need that bucket for your brake clean. But this is about all you'll need. So let's get started by starting to loosen these lug nuts. Then we'll jack the vehicle up and get started. Safety first, before we get started. I also just had eye surgery and probably should not be doing this in the first place. But yeah, safety first. So I'm gonna take my ring off, put my gloves on, and we'll get this knocked out. All right, so step one, with the weight of the vehicle still down, we're gonna loosen these lugs. Grab a 19 milli, grab a breaker bar, and let's go to town. You can loosen it in the star spec just like you would if you're torquing it on. Doesn't matter too much when you're loosening it. Now, with the same 19, just grab your driver, and we're gonna loosen them all except for, we're gonna leave one of the top ones on so that when we jack the vehicle up, it doesn't fall on us. There we go. Don't lose these, put them somewhere safe. Leave that top one on for now. Now let's get this vehicle jacked up. All right, a couple more important notes as we're jacking this vehicle up. Now, this vehicle does not call for jacking up with the differential. I know there's some vehicles, it is a jacking point, but the manual calls for somewhere on the axle tube. I guess the closer the better, but the problem you run into is if you put this too close to here, you lose a little bit of working room, and we might need to get in here later, which I'll explain. But put it as close to your link there and that's a good place to jack it up. And then I'll show you good spots for your jack stands. Other note, you want to make sure you have chocks out on those front wheels and set your parking brake. If your parking brake's not set and you're on flat ground, great. I'm at a little bit of an angle, so it makes this repair a little bit sketchier. However, putting your parking brake on will expand the shoes in here, so it may make it a little bit more difficult to knock that rear drum off. And we'll get to how to combat that if that ends up happening to us here. All right, as far as jack stand placement goes, another good spot's along the axle tube here. I like to leave my jack in for additional safety, and then when we take this rim off, we're gonna put it under the framing to give us even another step of safety. And my second jack stand, I put it right under here, a little bit forward of the wheel wall. So worst case scenario, we have 3 different backups, but this vehicle, this repair, you shouldn't be under the vehicle a whole lot, which is always a good thing. Okay, with the car jacked up, we just get our last lug nut off of here with the 19 mil, and we see daylight underneath, and we should be able to pop this right off. Now, like I said, I'm gonna roll this down, and we're gonna put it under the framing just to give ourselves even an additional step of safety. So here is our old drum. Looks great. There's absolutely no play in it either, so that's gonna be really fun to take off. I'm gonna start by tapping it with a hammer gently. Probably throw some WD-40 in these joints here, or where these lugs are coming through, and then start to try to wiggle it off. If we have to, we'll go back behind the access tab, and there's a little shoe spreader with a ring that we can adjust with a flathead to loosen it if we have to. But let's see how we do. All right, here goes nothing. Let's hit it with some WD-40. Also put something under this so you don't destroy your driveway. Ear protection is highly recommended at this phase, but all right, absolutely no give. So we're going to adjust the parking brake extension for the brake shoes, and I'll show you how to do that. Well, it was sunny about 5 minutes ago, and now all hell has broken loose. So we're gonna have to take a momentary pause. We have major flooding going on already, so we'll be right back. Now, in the case where your drum is super locked on there tight, there's 2 things you can do. Number 1, a little riskier, but as long as you got everything in place and your safeties and your chocks, it's totally fine. We're gonna first try just taking the parking brake off, and that should release the extender in there when you put your parking brake on and loosen this whole drum assembly. So I'm gonna try that first. If that doesn't work, we'll go to step 2, and I'll show you step 2 anyways in case you run into that. So we're just gonna come over here. I'm gonna put my foot on the brake first. Yeah, don't mind all that. As you can see, we got some stuff going on here. Foot on the brake. I'm gonna pull the brake release and gently let off of the brake, and we got nothing rolling forward, so that's great. And now we're gonna come back over and see if it loosened up. Oh yeah, loosened right up. So we should be able to swing this off now. Just like that. This makes me a little bit nervous because it looks like somebody like balanced this. So, yeah, I mean, it'll probably be fine with a new one, but we shall see. So real quick, I'm gonna show you what actually happens when you put your parking brake on, just so you can see. So here's that dial I was talking about. What you're gonna do is come in on the other side with a flathead through here behind the vehicle, and you'll pull this spindle in the upward direction to tighten this screw head on, and that's going to shrink the expansion of your brake shoes. So I'm gonna hop over real quick and I'm gonna show you what's happening as you push that parking brake. Now at first glance, these look extremely intimidating. We have a bunch of springs going every which way. Here's your actual cylinder, the one that I said to get a replacement part for. We got a little cable guide here for that parking brake. We have more springs. These springs are actually holding the tension on and keeping the shoes and this whole assembly towards the main hub here. More springs down here. We already went over this little adjuster. And by the way, I am no professional, so I couldn't tell you every single piece of what all this means. But what we're gonna do is take some pictures and we're gonna reassemble it exactly how it was and clean things up a bit. Now, as far as disassembling this, there's not necessarily a particular order that I know of to make it as easy as possible. I can only tell you what my dumbass kind of did on the other one, and I ended up figuring it out. But again, take photos at every angle, noting where all the springs are going. What we're gonna do here is start down here because there's really not a whole lot of tension at all. And we're gonna start removing these springs. We're gonna tighten our spacer up as much as possible to bring these shoes in together and ideally take some tension off of that spring. So I'm gonna get to work starting to disassemble this, and we'll go from there, taking stops along the way. First thing you can do, come down here, push up on this little lever here. That's gonna loosen your cable along your cable guide. And then from there, you'll notice you can now unhook this little spring that was hooked onto that lever down here. So again, push up, loosen that cable guide, and just move that out of the way for now. From there, you'll notice this lever has a notch with a bigger hole, and if you pull down, like so, you can slip that out, and out comes your small spring as well. Now, a quick reassembly note. The portion that the tooth is grooved inward like this faces the vehicle and rides along these little teeth here, these gear teeth. And this spring here, this small spring, comes in behind it, goes on this post here, and sits in this direction. Now we could come in under here and start spinning. It should just be hand tight at this point. Start spinning this closed. And as you can see, less and less grooves are showing on our actual threads. And we are slowly compressing these shoes. Another quick note. I know you may have taken pictures, but actually go in and note what order these springs overlap each other with. So you'll notice this longer spring on the right side is at the very top, followed by this shorter spring below it, followed by the cable guide, followed by the actual drum shoe nut that you need to make sure you keep. So note that order as you're disassembling this. Next up, what I'm gonna do is take a C-clamp here, and I'm gonna compress the shoe on the left side over so we can start working on these little tension springs. Now these little tension springs, what you're gonna notice, there is going to be a notch, and what we need to do is push it in with a pair of pliers and twist it 90 degrees so that this little flat piece lines up with that, and this spring is gonna come off. Now that C-clamp that we put on there is gonna help it hold in place. Another note that may help you, if you go on the back side, you'll see the end of it, which is right here. If you can, try to get your C-clamp right on that. That'll help you out. Or you could just put your finger on it so that little piece doesn't spin as you're trying to get it off here. So I'm gonna start with my pliers. You could use really any pair of pliers, and you're just gonna grab the side of this little spring here, and you're gonna push in and twist at the same time. And there we go. And then just push this little piece back through the other side, grab it and throw it in your bin. Feel for that end cap on the other side. And we got our other side popped out here. We'll drop that in our bucket. And now, once we loosen this C-clamp, you're gonna see how much more play we have with this whole assembly here. Now, with those tensioners removed, we should be able to start wiggling all this, which is what we want. And the first thing you can do is take this spacer out of here by pulling gently apart and then twisting, and it should fall right out. For these springs, I would get yourself a beefier pair of pliers. It just gives you a lot more leverage. We're gonna tackle this top spring first because that's the one on top. We can't get to the other ones till we remove that one. So I'm gonna try to knock that out first. That spring's off. You can tackle this next one. And once you release that spring, this whole thing should come loose on this side. Now we can access one of our little pistons for the cylinder. They should pop right out. We're gonna need to clean that up. In our bucket it goes. Okay, next we'll tackle this spring here. Once that spring's off, there's just a little J-hook that holds it into this hole up here. Into the box it goes. Then we have our parking brake cable into the box. The nut, or the washer, sorry. I forget what they call this. It's like the shoe spacer or something. Okay. Now, you should be able to fully pull off your left side brake shoe and that bottom cable that was just simply J-hooked into the bottom here. That's your long cable. And we'll put that away. These are actually not in terrible shape, so somebody must have came in here and done these, but I already have the replacement parts. So next up, we can take off this actual metal spacer. I'm sure that's what it's called. That'll come out into the box. It goes. We'll get our left side little mini piston. And now it's just like clockwork. Quick note with this spring here, you have to keep the cable guide on the back of it. And when that cable guide goes back in with the J-hook to the shoe, the cable guide follows a similar arc as the actual brake shoe. So it's gonna face that way as it goes back on. Keep these two pieces together if you can. Now we've come to the point where the only thing left is the actual parking brake shifter, and this is by far the worst part. If you notice in here, there is a little C washer that is not easy to get out. This guy right here. You just kind of play with it with pliers or flatheads, prop it up, and that should pop out this last lever here, which is where your parking brake is attached to this shoe. There it goes. Yeah, that is not a fun piece there. Also, there's a very small flat washer that flew away. I gotta find that now. Oh, there it is. So this sits directly behind that little C washer, so don't lose that either. Now's a good time with pretty much everything disassembled other than the brake cylinder, which I'm doing just because I'm in here anyways. Go ahead and spray your stuff down, grab a brush, just let the brake clean soak in it for a little bit. Get a bunch of that rust off and we'll clean up all these parts. All right, we're gonna give the hub a good spray down, especially this cylinder up here, because that's what I'm gonna replace next. All right, so at this part in the repair, we're gonna remove the cylinder here. I misspoke and said you needed a 15 millimeter. You're gonna need a 13 millimeter. There's 2 bolts on the back, and then grab a 11 meter wrench. Don't use the ratcheting side, use the open side. And what we gotta do is come back here, remove these 2 13 millimeter bolts, and then remove this brake line here with the 11 meter wrench. So I'm gonna get to that. No idea where that bolt went, but at this point you should be able to compress your piston a little and pull it free. Mine is locked in there, oh boy. So if your piston is locked in there like mine is, you can try compressing it a little. You're gonna shoot some fluid out, but if that still doesn't work, I'm just gonna tap on it with a hammer. I'm replacing it anyways. So remember, we have that backside exposed, so I'm just gonna pop at it gently. Holy crap. Oh, there it is. Gonna clean that up a little bit. All right, it's time to put our new cylinder in here. What you'll notice, it comes with a little cap that you got to remove first. You can keep the bleeder valve cap on, that's fine. The pistons do not come with it, so that's why we save those. I'm getting dizzy. Woo! And we can compress these springs inside. Well, we can, not springs, but we can compress it to give ourselves a little bit more room as we go to reinstall. But it's simply just gonna sit up here in this little Mickey Mouse shape here. And then I'm gonna loosely put on those 13 millimeter bolts in the back to try to line it up. And then we're gonna loosely put on our brake line, and then we'll start tightening everything down. These little cylinders have a tendency to kind of swivel, so you gotta line it up just right. That's why I like to put them on hand tight first. And lastly, for the cylinder, we're gonna hand thread on the brake line. And now we're gonna go in and tighten down the 13s first, and then finish up our brake line and be done. Remember, don't use this side or you'll never get this wrench back. Tighten this down. All right, quick note for reassembly. So we're just gonna try to almost work in reverse order here in a way, but for your lineup, the circles go towards the top along this bracket here, and then that spacer goes in the square pieces at the bottoms. So I'm gonna go on just like this. To start, I'm going to hand press in the little piston pieces. These need to be vertical, because what they're gonna do is line up with this bracket in here at the end, just like so. Next up, we want to reconnect the parking brake link. That's our fun friend, the little C washer right here, which I hammered flat again. And that other tiny washer that I think I lost. That's great. Found it. Remember that goes under this. We're gonna start with the right side here, because that's the side that the parking brake lever was naturally sitting on, and it follows the arc here. Remember the top hole? I spent like 30 minutes trying to get it through this one the other day. Don't do that. It's the only one that fits. It's the top one. She'll rotate it in, and then you're about to have a hell of a time trying to connect these two. I would just C-clamp these two pieces together, honestly. I just thought of that right now. So that's what I'm gonna do so that we could work this washer onto here. Okay, so with this piece C-clamped on, this isn't gonna keep falling out on me here. So I can work on getting that washer in here. There we go. Tighten the end there, and that shouldn't be going anywhere now. Now we could loosen our C-clamp. Should be able to rotate on itself like that, but not pop off. Okay, the first piece of this puzzle for our reassembly, if you remember. Okay, the first piece of this puzzle for reassembly, we'll take our shoe up here, line it up with this groove, and ideally with the piston as well. So you see it sat in there, and it's like this. I'm gonna throw that on there for now, and then I am gonna C-clamp this in place with this piston in there and this stuff on so that we can get moving. Now the next thing we want to do to help us just keep more and more tension towards the back is reinstall these little tensioner springs. And once you got a nice 90-degree offset, you know it's not going anywhere. And at that point, you can loosen your C-clamp, because this is going to hold this in at this point. So that first spring is on, and we're just gonna push it back as much as we can. Now, we can remove this C-clamp. We still need a little bit of wiggle room to get that spacer in there. So this metal spacer, our best friend, coming back. Gonna compress that spring in, put the washer on, and work it into the grooves. So we're gonna come in and push this spacer on the left side in on its side as far as we can. And once we do, we should have room to get it in there. Okay? So it's gonna sit in there like that. Both of our pistons are still aligned. Oh, let me tighten that C-clamp again. This is not fun at all, in case you were wondering. Okay, so now, here's where we're at. Got our first hook in up top, got our washer in, parking brake cable, we got our spacer. Oh, sweet Jesus, no. No. No, no, no. That ended up behind that, and that can't happen. This needs to be on the outside of it. Just gotta loosen this again. Free that up and repeat the process. You're learning with me. Congrats. So I've been rained on like 4 times in the middle of this repair. So outfit change. Let's reset and get the shit knocked out. All right, so here we are as it sits. We have our hard bracket spacer up top, good to go. We just pulled our parking brake cable out from under there. Don't make the same mistake I did. Our washer's still in. Our first spring is on the left side. Pistons are lined up on both sides. So now we just gotta work some of these bottom cables. We gotta work that bottom spacer in right here, and then we'll be on our way. One thing I did do of note, I just sort of pre-staged the cable feeder. There's a tiny little knurling on the edge of it, and when you line it up with a hole just above this spacer, it'll kind of sit here and pivot. We will put that spring on there eventually that's going to go up top here on as the last top spring. But I'm going to work this bottom spring here. So what we're going to do is come over here. If I could get this camera to adjust. This long spring, if you remember, this was on the bottom. And we're going to take the small J-hook side on the left side here. Also, remember that if you're doing this on the other side of the vehicle, aka the right side over there, this whole thing is just opposite. So the parking brake lever is going to be on the left side. All the springs and directions I'm showing you, make sure that you're flipping it because it's going to be all opposite on the other side. But we're going to get this spring working. This needs to go get stretched over into that little hole there and get hooked in. So I'm going to get that knocked out. Oh, Jesus. There we go. So we just got that bottom spring in. It's going straight across from there over to there. At this point, we can remove our C-clamp because everything's kind of holding itself together loosely. Okay, so at this point, all you should have left is your spacer that's going to go on the bottom there. Your last top spring, which is going to connect over here. This bottom little lever arm that rides along that spacer there for the parking brake, and the spring for that lever. And then we're done. So I'm going to work on getting this top spacer in first. Make sure it doesn't fall apart. Just line your teeth up. And I don't think I could do this with one hand, but spread the bottom until you get that thing locked in there. I'll just get that knocked out real quick. That bottom spacer is lined up in there. Next, we're going to work this final top spring. That's going to go with the little J-hook side over where your cable guide is. Rotate it. There we go. So once it spins like that, this should be facing this way, opposing this one here. Make sure you have space here. If you need to, grab a flathead and just push everything a little bit inward so you can grab this cable and wrap it around. It's your final top connection there. And what we're going to do is make sure we do one final check that everything's lined up. Starting with this spacer here, make sure that's in the teeth there, that's in the teeth over here. Pistons are lined up with the teeth. All of our washers and stuff are good. This is free and out of the way. And we're gonna get this last spring knocked out on the top. There we go. Looks lined up and nice. Now we just gotta work the bottom. Get our parking brake cable hooked up and we are gonna throw that drum on and be done. So if you've reached this point, congratulations. You've probably lost a few years of life like myself. But we're gonna take this bracket. Remember, the side that is curved or beveled at the bottom needs to face that little gear. First thing we're gonna do though is take the spring for it. I'm gonna take that spring, flip it around so that this arm is facing inward toward the hub. I'm gonna slap it on this little eyelet here, just like so. Then what we're gonna do is come over and take the bracket with the big side, lay it over the loop first, then push to the left so it locks in. Then we're gonna take this spring and wrap it up and over the top. Now right now you might be saying it just wants to fall off, and that's exactly what it's gonna do until you put the parking brake lever on here. So there's a little part of this hook here that parking brake hook needs to go into. But remember, the parking brake cable does need to wrap around the cable guide up here. So we're gonna first, you gotta be shitting me. Oh no, we're good. I thought for a second. Yeah, make sure this is behind your spring, which I did not, and I'm an idiot, but it should still pop through there. All right, so now what we have to do to prevent this from free hanging like it is. All right, lastly, to prevent this lever down here from just sitting here and hanging, we got to connect our parking brake cable. So we're gonna come under here and connect it from the back side without it around the cable guide first. And once it's latched, pull up to release tension, come up here to the cable guide, and you should see it wrapped around there. If you don't, it's around that cable guide there. And that's gonna offset that spring tension that we just made down here. And everything should sit nicely into place. So overall summary of what we're looking at here. We got our right cable for the left side for the passenger rear. On top, we got our left side right under it. We got our parking brake cable wrapping around the cable guide all the way down, hooking into this lever, which is pushed to the left so it doesn't pop out. We have this little tooth here that provides tension for when we want to adjust this. If we do want to adjust it, you just simply go like that and you'll see your threads opening. But I recommend before you put your drum on, make sure it's all the way tight, especially in the case of new brake shoes, because that drum is going to be really hard to get on there. So we got our left and our right shoe. Our tensioners are in. Our pistons are lined up. All our springs are in. And now it's time that we finally get to try to throw this drum on. Before I throw the drum on, I'm going to give it one final spray down with some brake clean. Because, you know, I haven't inhaled enough of this today. Good stuff. And lastly, with our new brake drum, we're going to see how this fits on here. I have a feeling it's going to be rather tight. Get yourself one of these too to help you in these cases. So after tapping on the old brake drum for a while with the old, you know, finally got her on. Now ideally, you do want a little bit of play in this, and there is absolutely like no play. I guess there is a little bit. But what are you gonna do? I mean, it's a new brake drum, and now it's time to put our rim back on. So I'm gonna give it one final spray with the old brake clean. That's completely empty right now, and by the way, most of which is in my lungs at this point. We'll spray her off, clean it with a rag, and then we're gonna pop our rim on there. So at this point in the repair, all you need left is your lug nuts, your impact, and your torque wrench. For the 98 F-150, we're gonna torque these bolts down to 100 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna set my wrench. And let's slap this rim back on. Now what I'm gonna do is set the parking brake so that it can fight the resistance of the torque wrench. Again, that's gonna be 100 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go set the parking brake, get that done. The only thing left on the car is the jack, and we'll torque these down to 100 foot-pounds. Torque wrench set to 100 foot-pounds. Torque these babies down. All right, time to lower it down slow. And as you can see, it is raining yet again, but one thing I do like to do is always double check the torque after I've lowered it. I don't know why, I just made up that rule kind of, but I'll just check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100 foot-pounds, and we'll be done with this repair. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all of our bolts are torqued down. Last step, which will probably be another video. Wow, I can't talk right now. Are going to be bleeding your brakes, and I will cover that soon. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more.